Got it.
So Tony, it's a pleasure to have you here at Cointelegraph here, and we've got a lot of history here with
thank you,
Cointelegraph.
Stephen.
No problem. Thank you very much. Thank you. How are you finding BlockShow America here in Vegas so far? How are you finding the community?
Yeah, so obviously with the slight bear market in the price, lots of attendance have slowed down. The FOMO hasn't set in. If you Google the word Bitcoin, the words buy Bitcoin, it had an even bigger bear market and people Googling Bitcoin than the actual price. But this is a great venue. It's a very good turnout, and the event is great. The topics are good. I just got off the panel debating whether ICOs are good or bad for the ecosystem.
Talk to me about your position on whether you feel ICO, given the state of the past 6 months, 60% of the companies failing or not showing up with a product. What's your stance? How did you feel when you went on the stage debating this in your stance?
I'm not a fan of ICOs. Like you said, like 60% have already pretty much failed. I'm expecting like a 98% failure rate. Now, that's exactly what happened in the dot-coms. There was a 98% failure rate. And there's nothing wrong with that. The difference is that even in the dot-com, this was a slight problem. It's a bigger problem now. Those companies were going public on the NASDAQ way too early, with no oversight, no regulation, and the average Joe was trading these companies for $100 a share, and they ended up being vaporware, a simple front-end website with nothing actually going on. That kind of got cleaned up and people realized, hey, I'm not going to do that. Now, I don't mind 98% of the companies failing when the people investing in those companies are qualified investors, people that actually have the money to lose, and people that have more resources like lawyers because they're rich and they can go after people that scam them for the money. What's happening with ICOs is that they are soliciting unqualified investors. They are soliciting people that are normally go out and buy lottery tickets, and they are soliciting them by pitching them their idea, launching it as an ICO. 98% of them will fail, and the average Joe with a day job has absolutely no expertise or ability to pick winners and losers. VCs can barely do that, and I think that's not a good thing.
So how as a presence, as a phenomenal YouTuber and educator, right? How do you solve that challenge? What are you doing personally to solve that challenge of the miseducation and the misalignment to vetted investors, to the everyday Joe? And are you for regulation?
So it's not that I'm for regulation. I am okay with the current regulation that exists on solicitation of money. It's just that for some reason that regulation has not even been considered or enforced in the crypto space. The current regulation should apply just fine. I think the SEC has dropped the ball in identifying these ICOs, Ethereum included, as securities. And if they only maintain the current regulation on securities and fundraising and the solicitation of money from strangers, if they just enforced those laws that came about over 100 years of scams, I think it would be a lot better. So I'm not actually asking for new regulation. I'm asking for the current regulation to actually
best practices
hold.
Of industries that we know, payment industries, loyalty and rewards, securities. Best practices to be applied in an emerging sector.
Now, as to what I'm doing, while I do over 10 hours of video content a week trying to educate people, you add to that all of the production work that goes into that.
What's your channel again?
So it's just tonevays.com. I've kind of branded myself because I don't work for any company. So it's tonevays.com and a Tonevays YouTube channel, also Tonevays on Twitter. And we do over 10 hours of content. I even have a law show with a bunch of lawyers. We have more of a tech show every morning with a couple of developers. I interview people, so I try to just educate the average investor and the average trader. I try to teach classes on how to trade so that you know what you're doing and you understand, not to just follow any other guy, just make your own decisions. So I focus on regularly educating people, and I spend probably 50 plus hours a week doing that. I speak at 40, 50 conferences a year, traveling all over the world.
And you're not doing this just for the brand. You're doing this because you want to see a real ICO market, not the 98% failure that you feel it's going to reach to.
Correct, and it's not. I don't like the concept of an ICO. To me, an ICO is an unregulated IPO. I want to see this be regulated with the current regulation. I don't have a problem with that. Like a lot of people are upset that, well, it takes $2 million to take your company public on the real stock market, or like some high amount of money. Maybe not 2 million.
How do you overcome that? So I hear what you're saying, and
I'm okay with that number, by the way.
Why? So I'm a young company. I'm not. I'm speaking about a company that would be out there, back paper company, and they have their idea and they know that they can get the traction that they need if they have the funding to do so. You're still saying forget about ICOs.
Right. I completely disagree with that. Look, if the thing you need to get traction is money, your company, you have a problem.
Really?
You got to get the traction first. The problem is that all of these ICOs, they have no customers, they have no clients, they have no revenue coming in, potentially no revenue ever coming in, but they feel that they deserve $200 million.
Do you think this is a result of the Silicon Valley days, of when money was being injected into companies that sound as if they could accomplish something?
No, I think it's this. I think it's this ability to easily solicit money from strangers on the internet.
It's just as simple as that.
And I think it's just as simple as that. Any company that's ICOing, they're almost printing their own money or they're printing their own security. And it's the thing is, it's a combination of both. You are printing your own security to be acting as money. And some people think that, well, since it's both money and security at the same time, then neither regulation applies to me. That seems to be their loophole.
Right.
And I don't think that loophole is going to hold. So to me, the reason why it's expensive to go public on the stock exchange is because your company needs to first prove itself before the average unqualified investor should have the ability to speculate on your company.
But that takes away so much for innovators that are in areas where they cannot get access to that money. Emerging markets, right? You have these areas in these economies where, $10,000.
Right. This is the debate.
Right.
This is the debate. But what happens is 98% of these companies are just, they're pitching things that they can't even do. No one is fact checking this, right? So while the idea sounds good, the reality on the ground is that 98% of these companies, like half of the people soliciting ICO money know they're scamming, and the other half don't realize that they're scamming because they believe that their idea is successful, and a real VC will tell them this is ridiculous, and they're like, well, I will prove you wrong. I'm going to solicit people from Facebook, people from the developing world to give me, $10 of their $100 savings, and I will prove you wrong. And 98% of the time they don't.
Do you have any success stories that you like that have proven you wrong?
In the ICO space?
In the ICO space.
Not yet. I've seen one or two tokens that I consider legitimate, but I do not consider the amount of money that a company raised a success.
Right.
I think EOS is one of the silliest and most technologically incompetent projects there is, but they raised $4 billion. I will be proven right eventually, just like with Ethereum. I think Ethereum is unscalable, and they're going to zero.
So let's put a marker down. Let's put a friendly marker down. One of your pick one that's good for you. A scale of failure, and let's do World Economic Forum. We'll sit down again at WEF. What company do you think is going to absolutely fail between now and WEF that everyone is hyped?
When is that's in January, right?
In January in Davos.
Right. I'm not sure if I'll be there, but which major one will fail by then? That's a hard one. I honestly think that. I think sooner or later the idea of Tether and Bitfinex is going to come to a point. So I think the $10 billion or wherever there is in Tether, I think that's at risk of total disruption. I think Tether and the Bitfinex exchange, I think they're a big risk. I think Ethereum is an implosion waiting to happen.
Really?
Because
tell me. Break that one down for me.
Sure, that one is very simple. If you think Ethereum is functional, please go home and build an Ethereum node. I personally run a Bitcoin node that allows me to validate my own Bitcoin transactions.
Okay.
I am able to store in my $400 computer, an old computer, about 5 years old, I'm able to store every single Bitcoin transaction that has ever taken place throughout the history of Bitcoin. And it's in that node. And it's almost impossible to build one of those in Ethereum. So Ethereum is slowly coming to a point where you have one or two centralized companies maintaining the history of every transaction that takes place on top of Ethereum. And that includes every single ICO transaction.
What's going to happen next year when they accomplish their milestones?
They're trying to solve this problem, and I don't think they're going to be successful.
So you don't think in 2019 that when their target, you think they'll be able to accomplish their proof of stake, proof of work?
I do not, because like, how do you show up at you have a giant mining operation. I know Ethereum dropped in price a lot, but those miners are still making a lot of money. How does anyone show up, including Vitalik, and just somehow the miners, he doesn't even know where or who they are, and say, hey guys, can you please stop mining? We've decided to hand out new Ethereum tokens to the rich people that already hold Ethereum in a proof of stake model.
Right.
How do you do that? I'm expecting Ethereum to split again. There'll be an ETH for the Ethereum with Vitalik, the proof of stake one, and probably an ETW, Ethereum work. And now these two camps are gonna argue, where should the ICOs remain?
There you go.
Should the ICOs remain on a decentralized proof of work chain, or should the ICOs go to a centralized proof of stake chain where the people with the most Ethereum get to call the shots? Plus they have this deity Vitalik that gets to, everyone will listen to him. It's amazing that Satoshi not only was invisible, and whether it was a group of people, and he walked away so early that there isn't like, well, Satoshi said this, so we have to do what he says. Thank God Bitcoin is actually decentralized. So I do see, I've been wrong on Ethereum before. I expected it not to exist by now. Things always take longer. The ability for the market to stay irrational is always longer than your ability to stay liquid.
Absolutely.
I learned that lesson the hard way when I started out in trading. It was 2004, 2005. I learned it 2003. Around late 2005, I realized the insanity of the housing bubble. I kept buying put contracts on home builders and the housing sector. I was buying put contracts trying to be rich on that between late 2005, and I ran out of money shorting the housing market in early 2007. And when the market crashed, I did not have the money, and I had to go work at Bear Stearns, and that bothered me so much. I was 6 months early. If only I started shorting the housing sector with put contracts 6 months later in mid-2006 instead of late 2005, I could have been on a different path, but I may not have been in Bitcoin. I could have still been trading and enjoying the money, and no one knew my name instead of doing what I'm doing. So I do not regret my older financial decisions that brought me onto this to this stage right here.
All right, so let's go with your Bitcoin future analysis. What are we ending the year with?
I think the Bitcoin market is going to continue to struggle the rest of the year.
Really?
It's a little too early for me to say if the bear market is going to end this year or it will end next year. Since for a while now, since mid to late January, I have had the following targets. My most optimistic target from when Bitcoin was still $15,000 in mid-January. My most optimistic target was $5,000 for Bitcoin.
Really?
My most pessimistic target was $1,300 for Bitcoin. My timelines were, my most optimistic end of the bear market was late October, early November. My most pessimistic target for the end of the bear market is around August of next year.
Okay.
I am still sticking to those targets. I'm trying not to change any of my predictions until we have met both my $5,000 low and the late October, early November timeline.
Okay.
it's hard for me to predict the upside until I've called the downside. I believe we're going to continue to struggle. Now, it depends how the bear market ends. Are we going to rebound quickly, or are we going to stay? I do believe we will close out the year under $10,000.
Really?
But I do not know yet if we're already going to be going up, or we're still going to be, trending slowly down.
Okay.
I remain a midterm and a long-term bear on the price of Bitcoin.
So what are we at, 78 over the, up 78 over the entire term? Is that where it is?
What do you mean?
The overall price.
So right now the price of Bitcoin is around 6,500.
Right.
By me looking at the price of Bitcoin, I think there are too many over-leveraged shorts waiting for a big drop. Now, I am predicting a big drop, but I think right now for the very short term, it's ripe for a short squeeze back to the $7,000 to $7,500 area. I would not trade it to the upside. I would either wait for 7 or 7.5 to try and take advantage of the big fall in prices down to 5 or lower, or I would let it go back down to 6,000 and start breaking below 6,000 to actually get to my $5,000 target. So to me, even though I am short-term, very short-term bullish because of very short-term metric, I think these bullish trades to the upside have a bad risk-reward ratio. I would just wait for a good risk-reward ratio to the downside because I'm midterm bearish, but ultimately I do believe that Bitcoin will challenge the all-time highs by the next halving, which is coming around May 2020. I think going into 2020, I expect Bitcoin to challenge those all-time highs, and once we break the all-time highs of 20,000, the FOMO can set in, that fear of missing out, and we can move from 20,000 to 100,000 very quickly, which is why it's hard to predict. And I try to not to go out too far because you can be, I was looking for the bear market in Bitcoin to begin in November of this year. I was wrong by about 3 weeks, but I was also, but the 3 weeks changed the price of Bitcoin from 7,000 all the way to 20, right? So being wrong by 3 weeks of where the top is could be a 300% difference, right? So and lots of traders, they focus on price too much. They also need to focus on time. So many traders do not learn that time, regardless of price, is just as critical.
Absolutely.
And I think that if more traders learn to harness price in their trading, the better traders they will be.
Well, that is a great way to end this interview right now with some sound advice for a lot of folks. Really appreciate the time, Tony.
Thank you so much, Steven. Awesome. Excellent interview. And hey, good luck to Cointelegraph. It is where I started. My intro, I spoke on my very first panel in the space. Cointelegraph was just launching. They saw me on that panel. They approached me, asked me to write for them, and my career in the crypto space began pretty much with Cointelegraph. Find me on Cointelegraph. Look at my articles throughout 2014 and 2015 on Cointelegraph. They're as relevant today as they were then because I was writing about the bear market of 2014. People hated me in 2014 for calling the price of Bitcoin down from $1,000. My prediction was 110. We got down to 150. It's the same thing now. There's nothing new. It's just another bear market. My 2014, 2015 articles on Cointelegraph are just as relevant. Just change the date by 3 years and maybe add a 0 to the price, but nothing has changed, guys.
Right. Well, you know what? We should have a sit down when you come to New York. We'll do an interview and we'll talk further about those
I'm
prices.
based in New York,
right, let's do it then.
Find me there.
Let's do it.
Thank you so much.
Brother, it's always a pleasure.
Bye, guys.